History remembers Attila as a monster, the Scourge of God, the destroyer of cities, the man who made emperors kneel and civilizations beg. Every history book, every documentary, every Hollywood movie tells you the same story. Attila the Hun was evil. But here's what nobody tells you. Everything Attila did, every city he burned, every army he destroyed, every emperor he humiliated, Rome did first, and Rome did it worse. The difference is Rome had better historians. To understand why Attila was right, you need to forget everything you think you know about the fall of Rome. Because the story you were told is missing something important. It's missing the 200 years before Attila arrived. 200 years of what Rome did to the people who would eventually destroy it. Let's start with a number. 400,000. That is the conservative estimate of how many people the Roman Empire enslaved every single year at its peak. Not total. Per year. Every year, 400,000 human beings, men, women, children, stripped of everything. Their names erased. Their families destroyed. Their entire identities reduced to a price tag in a Roman slave market. Over the course of the empire, historians estimate Rome held between 2 and 3 million slaves at any given time. In some regions, Sicily, parts of Italy, slaves outnumbered free citizens. These were not people who had committed crimes. They were people who had been in the wrong place when a Roman legion decided their homeland was now Roman territory. Now keep that number in your head. 400,000 per year. And then remember that when Attila arrived at the gates of Roman cities, he didn't enslave anyone. The Huns didn't come from nowhere. They came from the Eurasian steppe, the vast grassland stretching from Hungary to Mongolia. A nomadic people, extraordinary horsemen, a culture built around movement, survival, and adaptation in one of the harshest environments on Earth. For generations, the Huns had lived on the edge of Rome's world, trading with Romans, sometimes fighting Romans, existing in an uneasy but functional relationship with the empire on their western border. Then Rome did something that changed everything. They started using Hunnic warriors as mercenaries. On the surface, this seems reasonable. The Huns were exceptional cavalry fighters. Rome needed cavalry. Simple transaction. But here is what actually happened. Rome took Hunnic warriors, paid them, used them to fight Rome's wars, and then consistently cheated them. Paid them less than promised. Denied them the land grants they were owed. Treated them as tools rather than allies. Rome had been doing this to every group on its borders for centuries. The Goths, the Vandals, the Franks, the Saxons. Bring them in. Use them. Discard them. And then act surprised when they turned around and attacked. Attila had watched this pattern his entire life. He had no intention of repeating it. Here is something the history books rarely emphasize. Attila the Hun was not an illiterate barbarian chieftain. He spoke multiple languages, Latin included. He had grown up partially in the Roman court, sent there as a political hostage in his youth, as was customary for the children of allied leaders. He had seen Rome from the inside. He had eaten at Roman tables, walked Roman streets, watched Roman senators debate in the Forum, observed Roman emperors make decisions. And what he saw from the inside, as a young man who had every reason to admire Rome, was not the civilization the history books celebrate. He saw corruption so deep it had become invisible. Senators selling their votes, generals losing wars and blaming their soldiers, emperors murdering their own family members to secure their position. He saw a system that talked endlessly about law and civilization while systematically destroying every people it encountered. He went home, and he remembered everything. When Attila became co-ruler of the Hunnic Empire alongside his brother Bleda in 434 AD, Rome was already dying. Not from Attila, not from any external enemy, from itself. The Western Roman Empire in the 5th century was a study in institutional collapse. Tax collectors who kept the taxes. Generals who ran private armies loyal to themselves rather than the emperor. Emperors who lasted an average of less than 3 years before being assassinated by the next emperor. The roads that had once connected an empire were falling apart. The aqueducts that had supplied clean water to millions were crumbling. The grain supply system that had fed the city of Rome for centuries was breaking down. Rome wasn't being destroyed. Rome was already destroyed. It just hadn't finished falling yet. Attila didn't break Rome. He pushed over something that was already collapsing. Now let's talk about what Attila actually wanted. Because this is the part of the story that gets erased. Attila didn't want to destroy Rome. Not initially. Not for most of his career. What Attila wanted was simple. He wanted Rome to honor its agreements. The Treaty of 435 AD between Attila and Rome required Rome to pay annual tribute to the Hunnic Empire. 700 pounds of gold per year. A significant sum, but not an impossible one for an empire that still controlled much of the known world. Rome agreed. Rome signed.
Rome promised.
And then Rome stopped paying. Not because they couldn't afford it. Because the emperor at the time, Theodosius II, decided that paying tribute to a nomadic chieftain was beneath Roman dignity. Dignity. The same empire that had broken every treaty it had ever signed with every people it had ever encountered, now suddenly cared about dignity. Attila's response was measured. He sent diplomats. He demanded payment. He gave Rome multiple opportunities to honor its commitments.
Rome stalled.
Made excuses. Sent diplomats back with promises that meant nothing. Attila had grown up watching Rome do exactly this. He stopped waiting. The campaigns that followed, what historians call the Hunnic invasions of the Balkans, are described in Roman sources as pure barbaric destruction. But look at the actual targets. Attila's armies attacked Roman military installations, supply depots, fortified cities that served as bases for Roman military operations, administrative centers from which Rome extracted taxes and resources from the local population. He was not randomly burning villages. He was systematically dismantling Rome's military and economic infrastructure in the regions Rome had stolen from people who were not Roman. Was it violent? Yes. Did people die? Absolutely. But compare it to what Rome had done to establish control over those same regions in the first place. The Roman conquest of Dacia alone, the campaign Trajan celebrated with a massive column still standing in Rome today, killed or enslaved an estimated 500,000 people. 500,000 people. For one province. Attila's entire campaign in the Balkans killed far fewer. The difference is Trajan got a column. Attila got called the Scourge of God. In 450 AD, something happened that changed everything. A woman named Honoria sent Attila a ring. Honoria was the sister of the Western Roman Emperor Valentinian III. She had been placed under house arrest by her brother, effectively imprisoned, because she had become pregnant by her estate manager, which was considered a scandal that threatened the imperial family's reputation. She was going to be forced into a political marriage to a Roman senator she had never met, a man chosen not for her but for his political usefulness to her brother. She sent her ring to Attila with a message. "Help me." Attila's response was extraordinary. He declared that Honoria was his betrothed, that the ring was a proposal of marriage, and that, as her promised husband, he was owed half the Western Roman Empire as a dowry. Now, was this a legal claim? No. Was it a political maneuver designed to give him justification for invasion? Absolutely. But underneath the politics, something real was happening. A Roman woman, imprisoned by her own family, had reached out to the most feared man in the world because he was the only one she believed might actually help her. That is not the action of someone who sees Attila as a monster. That is the action of someone who has looked at the Roman Empire from the inside, at its cruelty, its corruption, its casual destruction of the people within it, and decided that the man outside the walls might be better than the men inside.
Attila invaded Gaul in 451 AD.
He crossed the Rhine with an army that ancient sources describe as numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Modern historians estimate somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 warriors, the largest force to enter Western Europe in generations. And here is what he did when he arrived in Gaul. He issued terms to every city before attacking. Surrender, open your gates, accept Hunnic authority, and your people will be unharmed. Many cities did exactly that. The ones that refused, that chose to fight, were taken by force. Some were destroyed. But the cities that surrendered were left intact, their populations unharmed, their property largely undisturbed. This is not the behavior of someone who came to destroy civilization. This is the behavior of someone who came to replace one empire with another. And the question worth asking is, would that have been worse? The Battle of the Catalonian Plains in 451 AD stopped Attila's advance into Western Europe, a combined Roman and Visigoth force under the Roman general Aetius. Himself a man who had grown up among the Huns and knew Attila personally, fought Attila to a bloody standstill. The battle was one of the largest and bloodiest of the ancient world. Casualty estimates range from 150,000 to 300,000 dead on both sides in a single day.
Attila retreated.
Not because he was defeated. His army was still intact. His strategic position was still strong. He retreated because the Visigoth king Theodoric had been killed in the battle. And Attila, who understood coalition politics better than most Roman generals, knew that without Theodoric holding the Visigoths together, Aetius' coalition would fall apart. He was right. The moment Attila withdrew, the Roman-Visigoth alliance began fracturing almost immediately. Attila didn't lose the Battle of the Catalonian Plains. He made a strategic calculation and chose a different path. The following year, Attila invaded Italy. And what happened there tells you everything you need to know about the reality of Rome in 452 AD. The Emperor Valentinian III fled. The man who had imprisoned his own sister. The man who had refused to honor the treaty. The man who had called Attila a barbarian and refused to pay the agreed tribute. When Attila crossed the Alps and entered northern Italy, the emperor ran, left Rome, left his people, left the city that had stood for 1,000 years. And who stopped Attila? Not the Roman army. The Roman army didn't show up. Pope Leo I rode out to meet Attila. Alone, with a small delegation, and Attila turned around. Why? The official story, the story the Church has told for 1,500 years, is that God intervened. That Leo's holiness and the power of St. Peter caused Attila to withdraw in fear. The real reasons were more practical. Disease was spreading through Attila's army. Supply lines were stretched. The Eastern Roman Emperor Marcian had used the moment to launch attacks on Hunnic territory back home. But here is what matters. The man who stopped the most feared warrior in the world was not a general, was not an emperor. It was a priest, because there were no generals left, because the emperor had run away. Rome, the eternal city, the civilization that had conquered the known world, could not defend itself. And the man who could have burned it to the ground chose not to. Attila died in 453 AD, not in battle, not from a wound, not from disease. He died on his wedding night. Married to a woman named Ildico. Accounts vary on who she was and where she came from. He celebrated his wedding with a great feast, drank heavily, went to sleep, and never woke up. The most likely cause was a nosebleed, a severe hemorrhage while unconscious, caused by heavy drinking, that he drowned in while asleep. The man who had made Roman emperors flee, who had defeated the combined armies of Rome and the Visigoths, who had stood at the gates of Rome itself and chosen mercy, died in his sleep, alone, on what should have been the happiest night of his life. His empire died with him almost immediately. His sons divided it, fought each other, were defeated by the peoples they had once conquered. Within a generation, the Hunnic Empire was gone. And 20 years later, in 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire fell anyway. Not to the Huns. To a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer who simply walked in and declared himself king because there was no one left to stop him. Everything Attila had fought for, everything Rome had refused to concede, everything that had cost hundreds of thousands of lives, ended the same way regardless. So was Attila right? Not in every sense. Not about everything. He was brutal. His campaigns caused enormous suffering. Real people, people who had nothing to do with the decisions made by Roman emperors, died because of what he did. That cannot be justified, cannot be explained away. But here is the uncomfortable truth that history keeps trying to bury. Attila looked at the Roman Empire, the civilization that had enslaved millions, broken every treaty it had ever signed, conquered and destroyed every culture it had encountered, and called all of it civilization. And he refused to pretend it was something it wasn't. He refused to be used, refused to be discarded, refused to accept a system that had been built on the suffering of everyone outside it. Was he a conqueror? Yes. Was he violent? Yes. But so was Rome. The difference is we were taught to celebrate one and fear the other. And maybe, just maybe, that says more about who wrote the history books than it does about who was actually right. Here's what I want you to think about. Every civilization that has ever existed has called its enemies barbarians. Every empire that has ever fallen has been surprised when it happened. And every history book ever written has been written by the people who won. Attila the Hun didn't destroy Rome.
Rome destroyait Rome.
Attila just had the courage to say it out loud. Was he right? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to see what happened when another outsider looked at Rome and decided it needed to fall, the story of Spartacus, the slave who raised an army and almost pulled the whole empire down from the inside, is coming next.